All right. Welcome back to the Area 51 podcast, everybody. Today we're joined by Brett Johnson. Brett, you've got kind of a wild story. Very wild, and it's got a lot to it.
There's a lot to it.
So actually, first, I'm going to give you your drinks.
All right.
Okay. And this is why you came here.
Is this why I came here?
And this, I thought I'd give you a little bit of a special gift.
Oh, shit, yeah. You should see my trunk, man. I stopped last night.
There you go. You can pop as many of those open as you want. All right. Yeah, when I contacted you, you said you were itching for an L8.
That's right. L81, a Kentucky beverage, very popular in Japan. I've got to be honest with you.
Are they really?
Oh, it's horribly popular in Japan.
I did not know that.
But the problem is that when you first taste this thing, let's be honest, it's not very good.
You know, as a child, my father used to call them swamp water.
Oh, yeah.
Let me go grab a swamp water.
But it grows on you.
Oh, yeah. It's a taste that you acquire from being here.
That's it. So that's our plug for L8 and the L81 bottling.
Yes. Have you ever been to the factory?
I've not.
No, I went there as a kid. I really don't remember much of it, but I do remember going to have like tours and stuff. It's pretty cool. I definitely like to do that, as I get older. But we'll get into you a little bit. Right. I do want to talk to you a little bit about some of your. You have a good way of speaking. You have a good way of telling your story. I saw you did a conference in Paris.
I did.
And how was that? I wanted to hear about that a little bit before we start, because you were very on stage. You had a good presence on stage.
So and that's one of the things. So I'm a theater major, and at university. And one of the things that you find out is performance wise, if you're on a stage, you have to go big.
Right.
All right. If you're on camera, it's the small actions that matter. So you'll see,
right.
I do different things on camera than I'll do on a stage.
Right.
That Paris thing, I think it was the first year I was a fully legal person.
Really?
And I was invited to give a TED Talk. It was supposed to started out as a 45-minute talk. By the time I get to Paris, it changes to a 6-minute talk.
6 minutes. Wow. So they cut your time a lot.
Well, they didn't really cut it. They were like, can you make it shorter? Because we've got all these speakers. We've got a lot
they were
of
trying
time.
to get everybody in.
Sure, let's do that. So
Yeah.
that was 6 minutes on the perception of truth is more important than the truth itself, which... If you think about it,
yeah, I'd love for you to tell our listeners what your opinion is on that, because your stance on perception is very unique because of the experiences that you've had.
Sure. So think about it like this: it doesn't really matter what the facts or the truth is on anything. What matters is what I can convince you of.
Right.
All right. So take politics. That's the primary example. Right. Now, all right. I don't really care if you're anti-COVID, pro-vaccination, anti-vaccination, what have you. It's very hard to get the actual facts on either side.
It is, and especially with media, entertainment, a lot of things that are put into that. It's hard to really get a true answer.
That's right.
It really is.
I mean, you can't get the truth anymore. What you get is a bunch of pundits on television telling you what you need to think,
what you should think. Right. Exactly.
Right. And
got a lot
whichever
of
side you're skewing for it. And for example, I wake up every morning and I watch Fox News and CNN, so I can be pissed off at everybody.
Get a little bit of both. Right. Yeah.
But whichever side you're skewing toward tends to be that following that you're part of, that echo chamber that you're part of.
Right.
So that's this idea.
You hear more of
exactly.
what they say.
Now, where that matters in cybercrime, which is where my history is, where that matters in cybercrime, think of it like this. What's more important, that you own a bank account or that I can convince your bank that I'm you and own your bank account?
Right.
I would argue it's the latter at that point, all right? It doesn't matter what the truth is. What it matters is what I can convince someone of. Can I use your stolen information? Can I use your login credentials? What can I use to convince the bank that I'm you? At that point, the perception of truth is more important than the actual truth itself. Okay? And it applies to everything, social, economic, political, across the board.
So you're a social engineer. For the people that are listening, explain a little bit to them what a social engineer is.
So a social engineer is a fancy term for a con man or a liar. All right. I am very good about being able to read people and almost immediately figure out what their triggers are so that I can manipulate them to do what I want them to do. And the key to that is to be able to manipulate someone to do what you want them to do and them not even know that it's going on.
Right. They don't even know what the truth is.
All right.
Right.
So they want you want them to give up your login credentials, or to now we've got a lot of Zelle fraud that's going on, stuff like that. You want them to send you Zelle payments.
Yeah.
So it's all about manipulating that person, gaining that person's trust, using whatever you determine that person's triggers are, whether it's desires, motivations, fears, what have you.
Right.
Figuring out what that is and using that to manipulate the person to do
get the advantage.
Right.
Right. So with you being a social engineer, one thing that I was really intrigued with, so your history and like where it started, because it seems like a really relevant thing to you that your life of crime started at 10 years old.
Oh yeah.
So you were slowly becoming a social engineer while not even knowing it. Right.
Right. And just to backtrack a little bit,
Yeah.
because I'm not sure who your listeners are. The United States Secret Service called me the original internet godfather.
Yes.
And the way I got the title was 39 felonies, a place on the United States Most Wanted list. I escaped from prison, and I built and ran the first organized cybercrime community.
Right, which is now known as the dark web.
Right. So it was a precursor to today's dark web markets. It was called Shadow Crew at the time. Shadow Crew is actually the second site that I built and ran. The first one was Counterfeit Library.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the evolution of cybercrime today, which today's cybercrime, if it were its own country, would be the third largest economy on the planet.
Really?
All right. But back then, the genesis of all that were three websites: Counterfeit Library, Shadow Crew, which I built and ran both of those,
right,
and then finally Carter Planet, which was built by a Ukrainian by the name of Dmitry Golubov. All right. Those three sites lay the foundation of all modern cybercrime that we know today. Everything across the board. All right. What I was responsible for was refining, implementing, developing those types of crimes that are committed online today, and also establishing what I call that trust mechanism.
Right.
So if you think about it, the way that if in order for me to defraud a company or an individual, the way that I have to do that is I have to gain trust from that potential victim.
Right, exactly.
All right. So if you're a person, what does it take for me to get you to trust me? Does it take a spoofed phone call so that on your caller ID you'll see that it's your bank or the sheriff's department or something like that? Does it take some of your personal information? Maybe I call the caller ID says it's your bank that's calling you. I get you on the phone.
Pose as the bank.
Right. I'm posing as the bank once you pick up, and I start quoting back some of maybe your social security number, your driver's license, some of your financial details as well.
Right.
Enough to convince you that I am that bank, and then get you to do what I want you to do from that point. All right. For a business, it's a little bit different. For a business, if I'm defrauding that, how do I gain trust on that with that business? Sometimes it's stolen personal information. Sometimes it's your login credentials, or it's a browser fingerprint, or credit card details, or whatever.
There's lots of different ways.
A lot of different ways to gain trust. And you, as a criminal, especially a cyber criminal, you have to figure out what that is that gains trust with that victim.
Right.
All right. Now,
so you're doing a lot of like probing, trying to see what works, trying to see what doesn't work.
But understand, here's the thing about this stuff. Once you become an expert, first day on the job, you don't know what you're doing.
Right. Yeah, you're just there.
You're an idiot.
Yeah.
All right. You're doing everything wrong. You can read books about it. You can do everything else, but until you start to get involved with that and become that expert in that subject matter, you really don't know what the hell's going on.
Right.
Once you become that expert, though, there's not a whole hell of a lot of research you have to do because it becomes ingrained in you.
Right, exactly. Okay. And then one thing I've kind of picked up is that after you like really got kind of like established in cybercrime, everything kind of backpacks off of one another. It's kind of what I picked up from listening to a lot of your other content. Everything backpacks off of one another. So say you learn one big concept, you can kind of apply that to many different.
And one of the key, that's a good point that you're bringing up there. So one of the ways that really shows itself over the past few years is with pandemic.
Right.
Those stimulus programs were out there. So before the pandemic comes into play, there was a lot of credit card theft. There was a lot of synthetic fraud. There was a lot of different types of fraud that was going on. The government puts in these stimulus programs. They put them in with no security at all.
Yeah.
And then what happens? Well, every fraudster on the planet pivots over to that. No security in place. And the types of crime that they were committing, credit card fraud, synthetic fraud, all these other types of fraud, those tools that you need or that ability, that skill set translates very well to stimulus fraud. So you're
Over
absolutely
onto
right. One thing builds upon another.
Right.
Is the way it goes. And unless you have those building blocks, that's that difference between the first day on the job and the expert criminal.
Right.
You had mentioned, my life of crime didn't begin there.
Yeah.
10 years old for me. I'm from, for those Kentucky people in the house, I'm from Hazard, Kentucky.
Hazard. Yep.
So,
Eastern
right
Kentucky.
Eastern Kentucky, heart of the coal country and everything else. And that's where I grew up. My mom's still alive. She's down in London, in the Corbin area. But
in London,
yeah.
What took her there?
That's a good question. Probably so much fraud in the Hazard and Letcher County area that she migrated to.
Yeah, she wanted to move spots. Yeah,
to London and Corbin. But she was. You've watched my show before. My mom at one point, she steals a 108,000-pound Caterpillar D9 bulldozer. Yeah. She takes a slip and fall in a convenience store. We had a neighbor she acted as a pimp for. That's my mom. She was the fraudster in the community. And people need to understand that Lexington's not like that. But there are areas, and Eastern Kentucky is one of these areas, that if you're not fortunate enough to have a job, you may be involved in a scam, hustle, or fraud. That's
you'll find your way in a life of trying to make it work.
Right. You're going to eat at the end of the day. All right.
Through ways that might not be legal.
So that was my mom. She was always doing this kind of stuff. My dad was a captain in the Army. He got booted out, and he becomes a coal miner. And my dad was a good guy. My dad's problem was he loved my mom so much that
kind of got in the way.
Well, he was scared of her leaving,
yeah.
So he became this enabler. If she wanted to abuse someone, he wouldn't step in the way. If she wanted to commit a crime, he'd co-sign off on it and everything else.
Right. He wanted to make her happy so that she wouldn't leave.
Right. And that's the environment that I grew up in. And I always say this in every presentation. I say the same thing. I don't blame my childhood on my choices as an adult.
Right.
Because, when you're a kid, you can't help that shit. When you're a kid,
you're kind of just going off of what you see and what you know.
Do what the adults tell you to do and are doing around you.
Right, exactly.
When I became an adult, you've got that choice. You can make the decision not to do that.
Right.
And I made the decision to carry on with the criminal lifestyle and victimizing people.
I have a question for you. So being at a young age and seeing all those things, it has to make it harder as an adult to make that decision though? Because if you've known nothing but bad decisions and bad influences and, no direction,
right.
How are you supposed to make that right decision?
Well, the problem is you're right in what you're saying. All right. You're absolutely right in what you're saying. So the groundwork was laid for me to be that criminal if I decided to do that.
Right.
I didn't really meet my first decent person until I was 16, a junior into high school at that point. English teacher took me in under a wing, and that was the first really decent individual that I really had interactions with, because not only my mom, but everyone on that side of the family, they were fraudsters. The whole environment was criminal. But that choice thing, it's what I say. When you say something like that, I point out my sister, for example, and we'll talk about that here in a second, but my sister has the exact same upbringing that I did, other than shoplifting, and my life of crime begins with shoplifting. Shoplifting food for me and my sister. My mom comes home, sees all the shit we've stolen, asks where it came from. My sister says we stole it. She stands up and she's like, well, show me how you did that. Yeah. And mom starts to join us and run us as little shoplifters with her mother. My sister, other than that one shoplifting experience, she doesn't break the law anymore. She goes off. She's a parent, a teacher, really good citizen.
So she did pick that other.
She did. She chose not to go into the criminal lifestyle. I was different. Now, that being said, it's important to understand that what I call that Eastern Kentucky mentality.
Yeah.
All right. It's certainly there's the mentality of it's a man's job to provide for the family.
Yeah, and that's very relevant in Kentucky.
Right. Very relevant. But it's also when you think about it, when you translate that to that criminal mindset and lifestyle, we had me, we had my sister. Well, it's the brother's job to step the hell up and do what needs to be done.
Right.
So in a very real sense, I shielded my sister, or tried to, from a lot of that stuff as best as I could.
Yeah.
I still, you're right about that choice being almost defined going into adulthood.
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard, especially if you have no good influence. You have nothing to kind of show you that is a thing. You said you didn't meet your first good person until you were 16. You
16.
said junior in high school, and it was a teacher. if you would have not gotten that, how much farther would it have gone?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's one of those things. It's like, you really didn't have that. So it is your fault, but it's just lack of knowledge that kind of makes it.
It is, but I understand that that when I'm 16, I'm in that environment, and I excelled in that environment. Became one of the top English students in the state. Was head of the academic team, head of the mock trial team. On the yearbook when I graduated high school, I got every single superlative in the book except for best physique and best looking. As you can tell, I got that face for radio, but I got every one of them for that. But that, all right. But it's you can say all that you want to say. The issue is this personal accountability and responsibility.
Right.
At some point, you've got to say, no, I'm responsible for my choices.
100%.
Right? And that's what I'm saying here is that I made a conscious decision to continue to victimize people. It wasn't like I was a dumbass.
Yeah,
right?
you knew that
I
you were
had
making
scholarships.
Yeah.
I had massive opportunities in politics and tech and everything else that I could have went into, theater, everything else. And
theater.
I chose that criminal lifestyle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you think you were drawn to that? Do you think you were more drawn to it because of your situation in life, or did it kind of give you did the feeling of it draw you to it?
A lot of people say that about the feeling. It's a rush to commit crime.
Mm-hmm.
Make no mistake, it's a rush to be able to defeat $1 billion company or $1 billion security company, to evade law enforcement, everything else. It's a rush until it's not.
Right, until they catch you.
Until it becomes a chore.
Right.
Even before they catch you, it gets to the point where it's no longer fun.
Yeah.
All right.
At some point, did you kind of continue because it was already such a thing? It was too late to kind of pull out, if you know,
probably the last 2 years of my criminal empire was like that.
Okay.
All right. Certainly, I would say the last 2 years were like that, where because we had with Shadow Crew, we had intercepted text messages from the Secret Service about them investigating us. So we knew we were on their radar. We were seeing IPs come in from all these government agencies worldwide. Members were getting arrested, everything else, and it becomes far less fun at that point.
Oh yeah, and at one point, wasn't it? Once everything kind of came crashing down, it was 36 people in one day.
So
6 countries.
So it was a Sunday. We made the front cover. So Shadow Crew makes the front cover of Forbes, August of 2004. Headline, Who's Stealing Your Identity? October 26, 2004, United States Secret Service arrests 33 people, 6 countries, 6 hours.
Wow.
That was a Sunday. I was the only guy publicly mentioned as getting away. Now, when you read police reports about this, and the books, my book's going to come out next year, but when you read police reports about this, Secret Service, the numbers vary. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's 22, sometimes it's 26, sometimes it's 33.
They're all a little different.
And the reason for that is one of the people that was the 33 indicted was Albert Gonzalez. Okay. Albert Gonzalez was our forum techie. He goes on to be the largest credit card thief in history. All right. He was the guy who got us popped.
Oh,
so while they indicted him, he wasn't arrested that day, and they didn't actually charge him until he screws over the Secret Service about 2 years later. Okay. All right. So that was one. Another one was the guy who intercepted the United States Secret Service text messages. They didn't want him to be in the news at that point in time because it would be an embarrassment. So there are all these individuals that were indicted.
They wanted to cover their
but
ass.
They didn't want to mention those. So that's why the numbers vary from those 20s up to the high 33. But it was actually 33 that were arrested on that day.
So what is your initial reaction when that comes out? What do you remember exactly what you were doing? How?
Oh man.
Did your jaw drop? How is that feeling seeing that happen?
So a couple of reactions. I was in Charleston, South Carolina. And when we made the front cover of Forbes, the way that I knew it, I was in Kroger, walked past the magazine aisle, there was Forbes, and it mentioned it on the cover. And I'm like, what the shit? So I go home, sign into these forums that were online, and the initial reaction from almost everyone there was, yes, we made it, followed by, oh shit, this ain't good.
Yeah, everything's coming.
So that was the reaction from making Forbes front cover.
Yeah.
What happens with Shadow Crew getting busted is a lot of apprehension. Mm-hmm. So I was the only guy. John Ashcroft names the character Gollum Fun on CNN as one of the ones that wasn't arrested. All right. I was the only one publicly mentioned as not being arrested.
Did they only share your handle, or did they share your name?
They only shared the handle.
Okay.
They weren't sure of the name at that point.
Oh, really?
Right.
Okay.
And the reason why I had stepped aside. So what happens is, for those who don't know, Shadow Crew, like I said, it was a precursor of today's dark web and dark web markets.
Mm-hmm.
What that actually means is that Shadow Crew was the first criminal website of its type.
Yeah.
All right. So it was an eBay of criminal goods and marketplaces. If you were an online criminal, you went to Shadow Crew, period, because there was no place else. All right. Now, when we get popped, it was, I forgot your question. What was the question? Sorry.
Oh, no, you're all right. No, well, so something else came to mind.
Okay.
As we were speaking. So Shadow Crew, I want to talk a little bit about the people in Shadow Crew.
I was talking about Albert, right.
Yeah. So are you kind of just like letting criminals in, or do they have to have credentials, or how are you finding the people to have this operation that's like, I mean, it's massive.
Right.
It's very massive. Like, how are you finding the people to, work with?
So back then it was kind of like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come, because there was a need for that type of network.
Right.
If you think about cybercrime, for cybercrime to succeed, three things have to happen. You have to gather data. All right, that's stolen PII, that's login credentials, credit card numbers. It's any tool that you may need, like proxies or spoof phone calls, Mimikatz, anything else like that. So that's gathering data. You have to commit a crime, and then finally you have to cash that crime out. The problem with that is that one criminal is not very good at all three things. He's good at one usually, sometimes two, rarely all three. So you have to network with other people. How are you going to network with a system of criminals where they don't know each other's name? They don't know where each other live. They don't know what each other look like. They'll never meet each other.
Right.
You have to develop some sort of trust between those individuals.
And you created it.
I created that. And the way that works is it starts with a forum, a large communication channel where you can reference conversations days, weeks, months old, take part in those conversations, learn from those conversations, ask questions, what have you.
Right.
You can, back then, and it works that way to a degree today, except if you're on Telegram. Back then, by looking at someone's screen name, what the skill level of that person was, what the history of that person was.
Okay, so they kind of base their name off of their experiences and what they're able to do.
Right, so my name was Gollum. My name was Gollum across all platforms on cybercrime. So when Gollum came online, you knew who I was in that environment, and you knew my history. You knew I was the top dog, that I could be trusted, everything else. And because of that, if I said that someone else could be trusted, so you had
a reputation.
Right. So you vouched for people. At the same time, the people who are buying or interacting with these other people, they review them. They post their comments about that. So you've got this entire network of vouchers, reviews. You've got escrow systems in place, everything else.
It's a massive network of people.
Massive.
Yeah.
And understand that it's real time too. So say you've got a credit card vendor, stolen credit cards. He's an outstanding seller. He's been selling for a couple of years. But maybe he's about to be arrested and he decides he wants to, make some bank before he leaves the market, and he starts selling crap.
Everything.
Well, because of that, because it's an open network, because it's real time, almost immediately when things start to go south for that vendor.
Right.
All right?
Exactly.
So it's real time data that's coming in, which is, when you think about it, it not only applies to the users on the network, but it also applies to any type of victims that you're hitting. So if Apple Store is wide open, Microsoft Store is wide open, you know exactly what you're going to get, you know what tools to use against them.
Right.
You know also when Apple or Microsoft or Amazon or whoever changes the security.
Because everything's keeping up
real time.
Right.
All right. Hey, it was working up until 2 hours ago. Now they've changed this. Well, what's going on? Then everybody starts to
everybody's going at it, right?
Yeah, and figure it out. Then you figure that out, and it continues like that. That's one of the reasons that cybercrime is so successful, that sharing and that real-time data that comes across the network. And nowadays, so Shadow Crew ended with 4,000 people, all right?
Wow.
Now, that sounds like a lot of people, but that was 2004. Fast forward to 2017, Alphabet is the largest criminal network. It ends with 240,000 people.
240,000.
That's 2017.
Right.
2 more years, 2019, just a dark web marketplace gets shut down, 1.15 million members. And all of that is pre-pandemic. Now, during the pandemic,
when everybody's at home on their computers.
And there's a lot of programs out with no security in place. So now you've got single communities that are millions of members large.
Wow.
Right? And that's a lot of the issue, too. At the same time, You've got law enforcement like the FBI, 37,000 agents across the United States. Less than 200 of them are concentrated on cybercrime.
So they need to crack down on it.
Oh, they need more members.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
absolutely need more members.
I had this little stat for you. I wanted to ask your opinion on it. This just goes along with what you said. So let me find it. So cybercrime is expected to surge from. This is the amount of money. Because I in one of your speeches, I heard you talk about how much money, and this was the one in France in 2018, I believe. You said a number about how much cybercrime has been stolen from the economy. So I looked it up, and it's expected to surge from $8.4 trillion in 2022 to $23.84 trillion in 2027.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. So with that being said, I mean, do you think it's kind of just like a never ending? Do you think it's just going to be new ways of people figuring it out and then new ways of people trying to stop it?
Well, I mean, that's what it is right now.
Yeah.
Right. Since you said that stat, there's a few other stats that kind of paint the picture for what this problem is. So a lot of people talk 0-day vulnerabilities, all right, 0-day attacks, unknown vulnerabilities, things like that. The truth of the matter is that 90%, over 90% of every single attack uses known exploits. It's the stuff we know about, the stuff we've been told about, the stuff we've not done anything about.
Right. There's nothing been put in place to stop it.
You got 41% of the routers out there have the default password. 41%. Doesn't matter if it's your bank down the street or inside your house.
Wow.
Got the default password on it. That doesn't count the billions of IoT devices that are out there that are hard-coded or default password as well. So you've got this access that's out there. If you look at phishing, over 90% of every single breach begins with a phishing attack. Spear phishing, about 87% successful. So this paints this picture of how this threat landscape is developed across the board.
For those of you that don't know, do you want to explain phishing?
Sure. So phishing is when you get that email and it looks like it comes from Bank of America and it's asking you to update your security, change your password or whatever, but it's not from Bank of America. It's from some bitch like me. That's looking to victimize you. That's phishing. It can be email. It can be text message. You call that smishing. It can be something like a telephone call. It can be a piece of mail. It can be someone at your door.
Any way somebody can try to make contact with you to get information.
Right. So criminals are always looking for one of four things: information, access, data, cash. All right. If you receive, tip for the day, if you receive any unsolicited requests for information, access, data, or cash, no. Do not engage with that person. All right. So that's a lot of what establishes that type of threat landscape that's out there. So how do you solve that? Well, you start by making sure that these exploits are sealed up tight. You know, if 90% of every attack begins with known exploits and we know what the hell they are, and we do,
what do you
why
think?
Is that?
What do you think people could do to, because it's not common knowledge how to secure everything. Right. You know what I mean? So how do we, and that's kind of your job now, right? That's what you do now. You teach people how to, block these attacks and how to, maneuver their way around these type of people and attacks.
That's right, kids. I am no longer that criminal sumbitch.
Yeah.
I was able to turn my life around today. I work with law enforcement. I'm the first chief criminal officer on the planet, spokesperson for AARP, actually an ambassador for AARP. There's a difference. I've got my own show. I work hard to protect people from that type of person that I used to be.
Yeah.
How do you fix that kind of stuff? Well, we know what the problems are. All right. It's getting people to act on that. Now, when I say about protecting yourself as an individual, you need to freeze the credit of every single person in the house, including kids. All right. Credit freezes are free. They've been free since 2018. The percent of the United States population that has one in place, 12%.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
12%. And it works great. It stops all new account fraud dead.
Yeah.
But
so
yet,
people can't open new accounts. And
they can't pull your credit report without your permission.
Right, exactly.
Okay? So it works great for kids. But still, you've only got 12% of the U.S. population that have a credit freeze in place. That's the problem across the board. Not credit freezes, but just that idea of not acting on the things that you need to act on.
On a way that you can prevent that.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Just give these other two tips out. So you freeze the credit of every person in the house. That means you contact all 3 credit bureaus. You monitor accounts, place alerts, and then use as much as I hate to say it right now, the only answer right now is a password manager. You got LastPass that got hacked, or I say hacked, they got breached a few weeks ago, and it looks like it's a nightmare. But right now, the answer is a password manager as the most secure thing.
Do you think that people should just write their passwords down still?
I'm not opposed to that.
Yeah.
I'm not horribly opposed to that. I deal with a lot of senior citizens, and I'm often asked about a password book. All right.
Yeah.
Typically, victims of cybercrime are not victims because they've had their physical phone stolen or because someone has broken in their house and stolen the passwords out of their desk.
It's because somebody's able to get to them.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So a notebook does tend to work pretty damn well.
Yeah.
All right. The problem is that, we tend to, like me, I checked my password manager. I've got like 425 different sites that have unique passwords. That's a lot of writing stuff.
That is a lot. Yeah.
All right.
That's not in one day. That happens over.
It happens over
gradual
amount of time. It sure does. And some of the sites I don't even go to.
Yeah.
But, it's still.
You're still getting that email from the one place you went 6 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And still hate them. But that's the issue is that oftentimes we're told what to do, we know what to do, but we don't act on it. Is the issue.
And that funny enough, that can apply in so many different ways.
Well, it's like that in the physical world. We know that you shouldn't leave your car doors unlocked at night.
Yeah. Yet so many people do.
We know you should lock up when you leave the house.
Yeah.
But a lot of people still don't do that. All right.
It's those same people though that when something happens, they're like, they're not taking the precautions, and then when something happens, it's like,
yeah, what happened?
Yeah, it's like they weren't expecting it.
I mean, I don't blame. So you've got somebody that's like that. And I've said this before. Yeah, I can leave the house. I can leave my door open. I can even have a sign saying, "Hey, the door's unlocked. It's got all these goods in there."
Right.
Even though I'm doing that and I'm a friggin' idiot, doesn't mean that I'm responsible for the crime that's committed against me. A criminal chooses to do that.
Right. That's not leaving. It's not like you're leaving it there for somebody. It's just they have the option to act on that or not.
Right.
Yeah. So I did want to go back a little bit though, because like I said, I'm really fascinated with your story as an individual. Like a lot of the things that you've said about your mentality, a lot of those. I'm curious. So you were in high school and you were in theater and you were top of the class in English. What happens after high school?
What happens after high school?
Where do you start? Where do you start falling more into crime? How are you as a person? That's one thing that I was kind of curious. Like, what are your thoughts at a young age? Like, because me as a young man now, I do a lot of like predicting or a lot of trying to plan for my future and stuff like that. What were you thinking when you were my age?
I've always been the guy that I kind of live for the day. I anticipate things in the future, but I've always been the one that tries to make the most of every day, even when I was a criminal. To answer that stuff about childhood, let's backtrack for a minute. All right. Like I said, my life of crime begins when I was 10, shoplifting. And while my sister, she doesn't go off into that criminal lifestyle, I did. And I think it's important that the audience understand, because maybe they've not seen some of these other shows.
Some of your stuff, yeah.
But my mom was an abusive parent. This is a woman, not only was she a fraudster and a criminal, but this is a woman that she would tell me and my sister that, she had given up her life for us, that she was going to leave and not come back, that she was going to kill herself. She just horribly abusive. A couple of stories that I've told several times before. There was a point, and she was addicted to Valium and was a drug user as well. But at one point, I mean, my earliest memory was Fort Lewis, Washington. I've got two memories that I classify as my earliest. The first one that I knew had happened my entire life. We were in Fort Lewis, Washington. My dad was in the Army. My mom was just a military wife. We were on base driving. Me and my sister were in the back of the car. My dad was driving, my mom in the passenger seat, and they were arguing. And usually arguing meant that my mom was screaming at my
At
dad,
your father.
and my dad was, Carol and Sue, calm down. What's wrong? Just stop. Just
Right.
please stop. That
Trying
was
to be the calming agent.
yeah, and that just egged her on even more.
Yeah.
All right, and I remember that she lunged across the car, grabbed the steering wheel, tried to get us into oncoming traffic, and screamed at him, "Are you ready to die, you son of a bitch?" Now that's the earliest confirmed memory that I have. The other one that I have, and I didn't know it was, I thought I had made it up, but it wasn't until a few years ago that my mom actually mentioned something about it that I knew that it was real. And I remember my mom had a woman tied to a tree in the front yard beating her, and there was blood and everything else. And I thought that it was just a fabricated memory.
Right.
Until my mom mentioned something about it like 5 or 6 years ago. And I was like, holy shit.
How did that
happened.
after effect hit you? Like, because
this leads into all this.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the type of environment. This is a woman who, I remember she called me and Denise. I would have probably been 8 or 9. Denise would have been a year younger than me. Her and my dad were arguing in the bedroom. They had this big king size bed, and my mom's side was over next to the wall. So she calls me and Denise in the bedroom one day. Dad, of course, is, please stop, don't do this, please stop. So she calls me and Denise over. We walk in the bedroom. She's like, come over to mommy. And I took the lead, so I was closer to mom, and Denise was farther away. And she used to smoke these Moore cigarettes, these long menthol cigarettes. Mm-hmm. And she looks at us, she's like, I love you, don't you know? Like, yeah, Mom. Well, I'm going to show you how much I love you. And she takes the cigarette and pretends, doesn't do it, but pretends to burn herself.
Herself?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is how much I love you. And pretends to burn herself.
Yeah.
So you can actually look at it. And the cigarette, is about 1.5 inches away from her skin, but she's sitting there writhing
acting
and
like
screaming.
Right.
And how does that affect you as a kid? Well, when you're 8 or 9 years old, it affects you like this. Well, that must mean she doesn't really love us, because now how screwed up is that? Well, she's not really hurting herself.
Well, yeah.
So she's pretending. She's saying she's hurting herself as a way to prove it to us, but she's not really doing that. So this is the thought process of a child.
There was a lot of psychological manipulation.
Oh yeah.
And,
Oh yeah. Another story that I've talked about before. My dad, we had moved from Eastern Kentucky down to Panama City, and my dad was the only job he could get was as a night clerk at a 7-Eleven. Mm-hmm. My mom was an LPN nurse. She got a job long enough to see him off, quit, and then would go party with other men. But this night she was home. My dad was at work. Me and my sister were in the bedroom playing video games. And she calls us to come in the living room. Well, we walk in the living room. She's got all the lights out. She's got these candles burning, this incense burning. And then in the middle of the living room floor, right in the middle of the living room, she's got these 2 dining room chairs set up facing each other. And she tells us that she has sold her soul to Satan so that me and my sister can have a good life, and that Satan is going to call her home when we graduate college. All right. But we have to prove that we're worth it.
Right.
And the game was, we would take turns sitting across from her. We were supposed to keep eye contact, not blink. We were supposed to think wholesome Christian thoughts. She was going to let Satan come out through her eyes, and by us thinking just good thoughts, we wouldn't become possessed. Now, as an adult, that sounds crazy.
Right.
As a child,
you're going along with it because
that doesn't sound very crazy.
Like we said at the beginning of the podcast, at a young age, you're going along with what your parents are doing.
Right.
Right. So you're going along,
and you believe that. As an adult, you and I, as an adult, we can sit there and say, "Well, she's out of her friggin' mind."
Yeah.
When you're a kid, you don't have that filter like that.
Right.
You don't know. I grew up in that. You're asking how this affected me growing up. It got to the point that, and I wasn't able to talk about this shit for 40 years.
Yeah.
It got to the point that I would catch my mom and dad gone, and I would urinate in the floor. Mm-hmm. And never knew why I did it until I started to talk about it, not 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. But I'd catch them gone. I was a rug pisser. Like on Lebowski. But that was what would happen. And the reason I did that, I got to where I was talking about that stuff in my presentations. And I had a lady come up to me after the presentation, and she said that before she got involved into cybersecurity, that she worked with children, abused kids. And she said that was common, that's a form of control.
Like a mechanism
that gets to be the only control a child has is when they're able to use the restroom.
Right.
So that's what I started to do.
To feel that.
And then what finally happens when I get to be 15, my mom had left my dad, and I was under the impression that I was going to go live with my dad. And I used to call him every Sunday, and call him this one Sunday, and he tells me that he had either gotten married or was about to get married, but all those hopes I had of escaping that environment were kind of gone.
Yeah.
And from there, I was at the hospital at the payphone, got into an elevator. A woman walked in that looked a lot like my mom, and I ended up beating the hell out of her.
Do you think it was because your environment or past anger built up?
It was all that abuse. Was everything else.
And you were...
Now, and here's the thing. I was 15. That's not an excuse. The abuse that I underwent is not an excuse either. I did that. All right. There's just, even today, I don't know how to really process that or deal with that.
It was also at a time, though, where you're not really too sure about your own emotions anyway.
Well, no, you're 15.
Right.
I can sit back clinically,
yeah,
and I know why it happened,
mm-hmm.
and I know the process of overcoming it and everything else, but it's different when it's happened to you or you've done that to someone.
Right.
All right. So that's everything that's going up through, until I meet this first decent
your
person
teacher
at 16. So at 16, I became this, top student in the county in Eastern Kentucky, everything else, well known, well respected, and I excelled. I came out of high school with scholarships. I finally got a girlfriend, and chose to go to community college for the first year or two. Well, while I was there, the theater director, he was doing a show that was written by the same guy who wrote the Three Ninjas movie, a guy named Edward Emanuel. And he's also, at the time, he was the head of the theater department at San Jose State. Well, Edward flies his ass in to Hazard, Kentucky to see the show. So he watches me. I played like 30 different characters during that show. As soon as it's over, he's like, "Hey, give you a full scholarship. You want to come to San Jose?" And I'm like, "Shit, yeah, let's do it." So he's like, "Okay, I'll be back in a couple of weeks. We'll talk more about it." So he flies back to Cali, comes back in 2 weeks, comes to my house. I'm outside shooting basketball with some friends of mine. He pulls up, and I walk over to the car, and it's like, "Hey, I'll come in and introduce you to my mom." And he's like, "No, I got it." I was like, "Okay." Yeah. So he goes on in. He stays in there 10 or 15 minutes, comes out, doesn't say a word, leaves, and I don't hear from the dude again.
Right.
And it took me a couple weeks to find out what had happened. And what had happened was he walks in, a discussion ensues, and the discussion was basically my mom pulled a knife on him and said, "I will cut you from gizzard to asshole. You're not going to steal my son from me."
Because she thought that you were going to go to California and not...
Because that relationship, my mom has always viewed love as a form of ownership.
Right.
We were her kids. We belonged to her.
And only her.
And only her.
Right.
All right. To give you an example, when my sister goes off on a scholarship to Berea. That's where she graduated from. And my mom finds out she's got a boyfriend. My mom gets in the car, drives to Berea, walks into the president's office, and proceeds to tell the president that my sister is addicted to drugs, that her boyfriend is actually her pimp, and she wants her kicked out. All lies across the board. But my mom is a very good social engineer, too.
Social engineer.
All right.
Yep.
So she's got the president convinced of this. The only thing that saved Denise was a couple of the upper alumni members. They knew Denise. They knew the environment they were coming from, so they talked to the president.
Yeah.
The president hears the story, calls my mom back, and my mom just breaks character at that point and shows herself. So that's what saved my sister from getting thrown out of college. That's what I grew up in, was that environment. A lot of what broke my spirit, I had intended to be that actor. And once that happened with the knife thing, it was like, fuck it.
Yeah.
And
was that your true dream before all the cybercrime, before all the decisions that you've made at a young age to, take that path? Was that truly what you wanted?
I'm really good on stage.
Yeah.
I'm really
I've
good
seen,
on stage.
yeah, you have a very
So
good stage
I'm good
presence.
on Netflix. You know, I've got that Netflix documentary too. I'm good on that. But yeah, I wanted to be that actor. I'm a very good stage actor. Now I get to do that, you know, with cybersecurity.
Different circumstances,
Different circumstances,
but
but
still great
I have a
that
lot
you-
of fun doing
Yeah.
that. But yeah, that was it. And I got married 3 or 4 years after that. And
So how old are you at this point? About 22?
when I got married, I was 24.
24.
Okay. And I get the worst parts from my mom and my dad. Mom, I get the criminal mindset.
Yeah.
Dad, I get that fear
Yeah, you're a lover boy.
of the loved ones leaving me.
Yeah.
So it's like, and I've always had that trouble showing love in a healthy way. So I got married and we moved from Hazard up here to Lexington. I told my wife, I was like, I got the job. It's that Kentucky mentality. Man leads everything, you know. Oh, I got the job. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, no need to worry about it. I got it.
Then I told her I'll do the cooking, cleaning, everything else because I'm a bit of a control freak too. And I didn't have it. Yeah, I didn't. I started committing crime after I lost the job. And
so is that your first real entry into, like, you're older now and you decide to take that route after you lose your job here?
I had chosen that before. I was doing it. So in Hazard, I was doing little scams and whatnot.
Okay.
I was absolutely doing that.
Actually, one story I wanted to hear a little more about. I want to hear about the Beanie Baby
The
toys.
Beanie Baby.
Yes.
So I'm in Lexington, Kentucky.
Yeah.
And I had, like I said, I had a 60-hour-a-week job over at Lexmark. I was doing all the cooking, cleaning, 18-hour class load. Something had to give. What gave was the job.
Mm-hmm.
Got to eat. So I worked for they had a thing called the Lexington Diners Club, which was a little card that would give you buy one, get one free meals. I remember breaking into their office here in Lexington and stealing like 200 cards so I could set up my own little Lexington Diner Club business. Got arrested for that. Then I set up my own charity of a Kiwanis Club. Got arrested for that, spent 3 months in the county jail for that one. After I got out of that, I went into cybercrime. Actually, within a couple of days after I got out of jail from that one, I went into cybercrime, and I started getting online, trying to figure out how to make money online. Found eBay, liked eBay a lot.
Yeah.
Didn't really know how to make money on eBay. And Bill O'Reilly, he used to host Inside Edition before he got his ass in trouble with the sexual harassment stuff on Fox. He was on Inside Edition, 30-minute TV news show, and they were having a show on Beanie Babies. For those who don't remember, Beanie Babies, little stuffed animals, high-dollar collectible, mid to late 90s. The one they were profiling was Peanut the Royal Blue Elephant, selling for $1,500. I'm sitting there watching like, shit, I need to find me a Peanut.
Yeah.
So I was naive, man. I was like, well, there's got to be one.
Kentucky.
It's Kentucky.
Yeah.
There's got to be one in a bin someplace, one of these Hallmark shops, something like that. So I skipped class the next day, went around to all the shops. Took me about 3 hours to figure out, no, idiot. There's none in a bin. His ass is on eBay for $1,500.
Everybody already knew if
That's
they
it.
had one.
That's it. So I'm like, okay. But they had these little gray elephants
They
for
look
$8.
very similar. Yeah.
They were the exact same. The tag was different. The color was different.
Yeah.
I was like, huh. So I buy a gray elephant for $8, stop by a Kroger on the way home, pick up a pack of blue Rit dye, go home, try to dye the little guy. Turns out they're made out of polyester. Don't hold dye very well. Get them out of the bath, look like they've got the mange.
Yeah. Random.
And I ripped a lady off of $1,500.
And you just ended up sending that.
So what happens and I had this yellow mop bucket, and I had the blue Rit dye, and I started with one pack of it, and I dipped the damn thing in, and so it's buoyant too. So you got the water and the dye in the bucket. You put the animal in there, and it's coming up. So you're having to stuff it down in there like this right here.
Yeah.
You get it out, and all the dye is running off of it. And you're like, well, shit.
It's just a mess.
It's a mess.
Yeah.
It's a horrible mess. So you got a spatula that you're trying to, big wooden spoon that you're trying to keep it submerged in.
Yeah.
Then you go out and buy more Rit dye, and you're trying to let it dry off, and you still get it out, and it looks like it's got the mange. I'm like, well, I'm not going to make any money on this. And I'm like, well. So I looked around, found a picture of a real one online, posted it on eBay. Lady thinks I have the real thing.
Yeah.
She wins the bid. Social engineering kicks in. Now, you were talking about, so more expert criminals. I became a social engineer as a child to survive that environment that I was in. Right. I had to know what the adults were thinking and had to be able to navigate that
through your past
to
experience.
survive. All right. when I became an adult, I chose to use those tools to victimize people.
Right.
And that's typically what happens.
Let me ask you this though. Do you think that's because those are the tools that you developed, or do you think that like, well, that's really it? Do you think that you used them because you had them and it was harder for you to control the use of them?
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, as a child, I had to develop those tools.
Right.
I had to.
Yeah.
There was a conscious decision though when I became an adult. Hey, I'm already good at this.
Yeah.
All right. I can already.
And then it was your decision to continue down.
Now, what happens is when this lady wins this bid, that social engineering kicks in. I don't want to be on the defensive of this conversation. I want to put her on the defensive.
Right.
All right. So I sent her a message. Hey, congratulations, you win.
No.
By the way, we've never done any business before.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I can trust you.
Right. You're already on the defensive, like, hey, I don't know if I can trust you.
Yeah. I want you to get this, but how do I know I can trust you?
No.
Tell you what you need to do, go down to the post office. Got a couple of money orders totaling $1,500. Now, wait, they're issued by the United States government. They protect you. They protect me. Send me those. As soon as I get it, I'll send you the animal. She believed that. She sends me the money orders. I cash them out, send her this creature in the mail, get a phone call because I was stupid at that time and did the crime under my name. Get a phone call. I didn't order this. My response literally was, lady, you ordered a blue elephant.
Yeah.
I sent you a blue-ish elephant.
Yeah.
And that's that one crime is kind of a lesson for the way most online crime operates.
It's like without telling everybody the whole story, they give themselves that advantage.
Right. So how did I build trust with her? I built trust. First of all, she's on eBay. All right. So she trusts the platform.
Right.
Okay.
Or she wouldn't be on it.
She thinks that eBay is going to make sure no other scammers are there.
Right.
She trusts the picture that I sent over. All right. At the same time, when she wins the bid, I put her on the defensive. It's her job to prove that
she's legit.
Right. So, and I offer her a solution to that. The United States government, the U.S. Postal Service protects us both.
So it sounds great.
Sounds great. So I build that trust with that victim. At the same time, she has a desire for an item. Right. That desire makes it easier for me to come in and victimize her.
Right.
Okay?
Because she's the one that has the want for a tangible item.
Right. Now it doesn't matter. Here's the thing. It doesn't matter if it's a Beanie Baby.
Right.
Or a PlayStation 5.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what
or
item.
what the item is.
Yeah.
The desire of that potential victim makes it easier for a criminal like me to come in and gain that person's trust
Slip
and
through
then
the
to
cracks.
victimize them.
Yeah.
All right. That's the way crime actually operates online.
Right.
Now, what you also find out, and that's one of the first lessons of cybercrime, is that if you delay a victim long enough, even though she knew my real name, knew my address, phone number, everything else, I just kept putting her off.
Right.
If you put a victim off long enough, a lot of them, they get exasperated. They throw their hands in the air.
White towel.
They walk away. You don't hear from them again, and they don't complain to law enforcement.
Right.
So that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happens today. And a lot of the reason is because who do you complain to?
Right.
She's in Illinois. I'm in Kentucky. Do you complain to the Illinois law enforcement? Do you complain to Kentucky? Do you complain to the FBI? Well, if you complain to the FBI over $1,500,
yeah, it's not.
They're not going to act.
Yeah, exactly. And then local police.
Right.
Which one?
Right. Local police knows that she's probably not going to drive or fly
to Kentucky,
to Lexington for $1,500. So there's not a whole lot of stuff.
The trip would cost her half of that. Yeah.
So that's a lot of the issue with crime these days, is that jurisdictional problem, manpower problem, the victim just getting exasperated, and not reporting it all to begin with.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you got the $1,500 from the Beanie Baby. That was, so you quit you lose your job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was the Beanie Baby in Hazard, or was that while you're in Lexington?
I was in Lexington.
Okay. So now you're in Lexington, you're 24, you lose your job, you're committing crime. How do you start to learn about going about cybercrime? Because it's not something like, especially at the time, what year is this, do you think?
This would have been 90, I was married in 94, so it's been 96.
96,
97.
So 96, 97. At the time, the internet and all these things, they're brand new. Right. So do you think that that's really what gave you the leverage?
A lot of that is the issue.
And being one of the first pioneers to learn all these ins and outs, loopholes, stuff like that.
So a lot of that is absolutely true on that point, all right? A lot of it is the willingness to do it.
Yeah.
So if you think about why crime is successful, a lot of the time It's because it takes ego, willingness, and then finally the knowledge to do it.
Right.
Well, I had the knowledge. I had a lot of street smarts because I grew up knowing how to do document fraud, charity fraud, insurance fraud, trafficking drugs, illegally strip mining coal. That was the environment I grew up in. So
the scams that you were around.
I knew how those crimes worked in the physical world. So how do you translate a lot of those crimes to an online environment? And that's what Shadow Crew was very good about doing. Was that, all right? Now that being said, this whole thing about crime is it boils down to how willing a criminal is to commit an action. All right. Come to find out, if you're simply willing to do it, a lot of the time it will work, especially if you pretend like you know what you're doing.
Because you'll make it happen.
Sam Bankman-Fried, all right, FTX. The reason he was able to be really what's going to be the largest fraud in history is because he was simply willing to do it.
Right. He was the one that stepped up.
He's a fucking idiot when you think about it. I mean, he really is.
Yeah.
He's an idiot. But he had the cojones to go out there and to try it.
And to do it, yeah.
And because he had that, he had a lot of backing. People like, oh, nobody would ever try to, defraud like this. And
at that scale, yeah.
Right, at that scale. So a lot of it is the willingness to do that. You couple, if you've got knowledge and ego coupled with that, you become a very dangerous adversary after a while. What happened with me is that was the first online crime I committed, and it's a learning process from that point in time. I did it under my own name, very unsophisticated, but I kept going because I got away with it. I kept going.
Yeah.
There was a case, and Bill O'Reilly gave me a lot of inspiration. So there was another case where he was talking about autographed baseballs on Inside Edition, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire. So I went down to the sports store, bought a case of baseballs, stopped by the same damn Kroger, got a Sharpie, started signing baseballs, looked at it, and I was like, that is not their signature. So then I printed off my own certificates of authenticity.
Oh, wow.
Sold them all on eBay, $60 a piece. That got a knock at the door from law enforcement. All right. And that's what prompted, over time, that's what kind of prompted this idea of, well, all crimes should begin with identity theft. So you do everything under someone else's name.
Right.
But it was a process getting up to that point. So I started doing that. I got to the point I was selling pirated software. Pirated software led into finally programming satellite DSS cards. Those 18-inch RCA systems, you can pop the card out, program it, turn on all the channels.
Right.
Started doing that, making a lot of money. About the same time I did that, a Canadian judge actually ruled that piracy was legal. Said since RCA didn't sell the systems up there, that his citizens could pirate those signals.
And for you, you're like,
oh,
wow.
that's money in the bank.
Yeah,
so you go down to Best Buy over on Nicholasville, you go down to Best Buy, you buy the system for $100, literally take it out in the parking lot, open it up in the parking lot, pull the card out, throw the system away, program the card, ship it to Canada, $500 a pop. Wow. Started doing that, I was pulling in about $4,000 a week, had so many orders I could not fill them all, and quickly, and by God, I mean quickly thought, why do I need to fill any of them?
Right, just take the
who
money.
Are they going to complain to?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Right.
So started to steal money, and that's where Shadow Crew comes in at that point. Started to steal the money, got worried about how much was coming in, figured the best thing I could do was get a fake ID, open up a bank account using that ID, launder the money through the account, pull out the funds at the ATM.
So Shadow Crew really, really started when it came to do with the Canada part. Right.
So that's where really the genesis of online crime begins, is that idea of you've got to be able to have these tools to be successful at online crime.
Right.
And a lot of the times you can't get the tools yourself. So back then, what happens is I start looking for a fake ID.
Yeah.
I was at UK, didn't know where to get them. So I got online, thought I found a guy, sent him $200, sent him my picture, he rips me off.
Oh, that's so ironic.
Oh, I got pissed.
Yeah.
I got pissed. But I still needed an ID.
Yeah.
So I found, looking around, the only avenue you had to network with other criminals was IRC, Internet Relay Chat, this rolling chat board. You had no idea who the hell you were talking to.
Who was in there, yeah.
Everyone was a crook. Everyone was ripping everyone else off.
Right. There was no legitimacy to it.
Right. And what happens is because of that, you get counterfeit library, and then counterfeit library transitions over to Shadow Crew. Okay. And then finally, the Ukrainian, Dmitry Golubov, if anybody ever wonders where credit card theft begins, it's with him. He saw the success that I was having with those sites. He was a spammer getting credit card details, and he says, I wonder if people would buy stolen credit card details. They will.
Yeah, they will.
So that's where all this stuff starts, is right there with those three sites.
Wow.
Yeah.
How much, and this might not be the best thing to hear,
Mhm.
but how much of today's cybercrime would you contribute to the group that you started?
A lot.
A lot of it.
So over the past 20 years, some of the biggest arrests, biggest frauds involved Shadow Crew members. All right. Bitfinex, 2016, $4.3 billion worth of Bitcoin. All right. A guy named Ilya Lichtenstein. That has Shadow Crew connections.
Yeah.
All right. Because Ilya Lichtenstein's dad, Eugene, actually hacked into the United States Secret Service computer that I was using. All right. When I started to work and I was screwing over the Secret Service. So it's got Shadow Crew connections with that. Albert Gonzalez, the largest credit card thief in history, Shadow Crew connections. Income tax income tax identity theft.
Yeah.
The reason everyone's tax return is delayed every single year, I'm the guy who created that fraud.
Yeah.
All right. I'm the first guy who ever sold stolen bank accounts, drop accounts online. All this credit card theft dates back to Shadow Crew and Carter Planet, all these three sites I was talking about. Gerald Cotton and Michael Patron, that's another documentary that's on Netflix, The Crypto King. Both of those were Shadow Crew individuals.
Really?
All right. Both of those people were. Even today's cryptocurrency, the Bitcoin has two precursors that were eGold and Liberty Reserve. They get their use case from Shadow Crew and Carter Planet.
Wow.
All right. So the tendrils of today's cybercrime and what's happening, all of that connects back to Shadow Crew. What's interesting is that back then, as a criminal, and I wasn't the only one, but if you were a criminal in those environments, the expert criminals in those environments, you had to know and understand every single dynamic of these crimes. You had to know the security of the systems. You had to know the tools you were using. You had to know the OPSEC on how to remain anonymous, everything else. These days, it's not like that. The sophistication isn't with the criminal anymore.
Right.
It's with the platform, because everything now is off the shelf. It's done for you. You've got tutorials, classes, walkthroughs.
Yeah, I mean, there's
else.
everything. Yeah.
So,
and I mean, so Shadow Crew really has a foot in everything.
Yeah.
Like all cybercrime related. You mentioned
you can't really overstate Shadow Crew's
presence,
importance in that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, the next important thing, of course, with the evolution of cybercrime was crypto.
Yeah.
And then
that's
Silk
what I was
Road.
about to ask you.
Right.
So you said something about Bitcoin, and so I was listening to one of your past videos. I want you to explain a little bit about the importance of Bitcoin, especially in its time.
Sure.
Because it was pretty much made to use on the black market.
Right.
Right. So I want you to explain your side of that, especially at the time. Especially at the time. That's what's really important to me, because now Bitcoin, kids are telling their grandmothers to buy it. They're telling their friends to buy it. You know, it's not what it used to be.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's not. So, and I'm not the only person that is of this opinion. Business Week a few years ago, they put out an article basically stating the same thing. Peter Thiel thinks the same thing as well. As I said, there were a couple of precursors to today's crypto, Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Those precursors are eGold, Liberty Reserve. Those are tokens that were used primarily by criminal environments, and both tokens were indicted for money laundering.
Okay.
All right. The only difference between eGold and Liberty Reserve in today's crypto is the blockchain. They didn't have the blockchain back then.
Right.
All right. But it's exactly the same concept. Now, what happens is Satoshi Nakamoto, and Peter Thiel has a theory on that. He says that the reason that Satoshi Nakamoto, the inventor of Bitcoin, is anonymous is because that individual, whoever that is, that individual was on a beach in the Caymans during a conference for eGold, where they were talking about the problems that they were having because they were not anonymous.
And then he built it.
And then he decides, by God, if I'm going to build this, I need to be anonymous.
Yeah.
Because if you're not, guess what? Your ass is going to get indicted for money laundering. Look no further than all those Bitcoin tumblers that are getting indicted right now.
Do you think he's truly known? Do you think he's truly anonymous?
I don't. And the reason why, when I began this legal career of mine, Nathaniel Popper, he was a writer for the New York Times, and I'm a friend of his. we had been talking about my story, and he was the crypto writer for the New York Times at that point. I was in San Francisco. He gives me a call one night, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Out of the blue.
Out of the blue.
Yeah.
And he's like, Brett. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, Satoshi Nakamoto has been hacked. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? He's like, no shit, been hacked. And I was like, okay, what's going on? So he sends me a set of emails. They call it a hack. It was not a hack. What had happened is one of Satoshi's email addresses that he had used back when he was actually communicating with people, he had let it expire.
Okay.
All right.
And
the email provider had not dumped the emails. So this attacker comes in and just registers the same damn email again. And he has access to all the old emails.
Wow.
And in those old emails, and Nathaniel sent over a couple of those to me, the attacker was blackmailing Satoshi for Bitcoin, of course. But one of the emails had mentioned it had come from the CIA to an EDU address talking to Satoshi Nakamoto, talking about how these criminals, now this was back 5 years ago,
right,
talking about how these criminals, these organized criminal elements were taking over power stations to mine Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Now that's a huge problem now. Back then, no one had ever heard of that.
Right. It's brand new.
Right. Now, at that point in time, whoever Satoshi was had responded, hey, it's not like Bitcoin is anonymous. You can track this transaction.
To the blockchain.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was the interactions that went on. So someone absolutely knows who this individual is.
Wow.
And it's not like he had died, like some people think that. I forgot who the dude is that some people think it was. But so Satoshi was anonymous. Satoshi comes out with Bitcoin. Now, I am fully convinced that Satoshi understood that the first adoptees to tech that can be used, if the tech can be used to remain anonymous or to launder money, the first adoptees tend to be criminal environments.
Right.
Which is exactly what happens. At about the same time, you get this guy named Ross Ulbricht, who starts the first dark web marketplace called Silk Road.
Yep.
The only form of payment he allowed was Bitcoin. Now, the problem is that online crime, I don't care if you're trying to buy pot, weapons, pressure cookers, cane sugar, fentanyl, stolen credit cards, what have you, you can't pay for that with $20 bills.
Right.
You've got to pay for it somehow. We had that problem with Shadow Crew. That's why we had eGold. That's why we had Liberty Reserve. That's why we used prepaid debit cards, Western Union, MoneyGram, all these other things. You've got to be able to pay for those goods and services somehow in a somewhat anonymous way. Ross Ulbricht understood that. So he says the only form of payment I'm allowing is Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin, back when it first came out, people were like, oh, shit, it's anonymous. Yeah. No, it's not anonymous. It's very public.
Right.
All right. And we see that every single day. That's why criminal environments these days are moving toward Monero, which is an anonymous payment term. All right. But the first real use case for crypto was Silk Road. The reason that Bitcoin today is as popular as it is because it was given its real use case in a criminal environment. Even today, a lot of the funds, a lot of money laundering takes place, and I know that I'm going to get feedback on this because you're absolutely right. Most money laundering uses U.S. dollars. Absolutely right.
Right.
But if you're talking about online crime, money laundering takes place using
cryptocurrency,
and you finally cash it out to cash.
Right.
All right. But crypto absolutely has a use case in criminal environments and money laundering. During this crypto winter, which maybe we're coming out of, even though it looks like the numbers are just kind of synthetic right now.
Yeah.
Even during the crypto winter, you still had a use case for criminal environments.
Right, because because of the anonymous aspect.
Right. You've got to be able, if you're buying pot, you got to be able to pay for that.
Yeah.
And you're going to pay for it these days with Monero.
Yeah.
So you got to go get that stuff someplace.
You're not going to buy it as yourself.
Right. If you're buying credit card information, you don't want law enforcement to know that you're paying for it with your bank account. So you've got to go get Monero someplace. All right. Then what happens is whoever receives a Monero will ultimately convert it to Ethereum or Bitcoin for that.
And then eventually it gets turned into cash.
Right. And then it gets
somewhere
turned
down
into
the
cash.
road. Yeah.
Somewhere down the road, it's going to turn into cash.
Yeah.
Period.
All right. So I did want to ask you that because you have a good understanding of how it was at the time.
Right.
I do want to get back into your story with Shadow Crew and then how that ended up progressing. So I did have one question I want to ask you. What do you think that you were bringing in? Like, what are some of the biggest like single transactions that you? Because I've heard the story where you were hitting ATMs throughout the day, and what are some of the biggest transactions that you ever made?
Well, I don't like to talk about the money stolen.
Yeah.
Because I don't want people to think I'm bragging about that. But with income tax fraud, I would steal $160,000 a week, 10 months out of the year.
Yeah.
All right. So to give you an idea, I don't have my backpacks in the car, but a JanSport backpack, like you see on campuses all the time, that will hold $150,000 in 20s stacked properly. That's 7.5 keys of cash, because when you get cash like that, you do weird shit. You start to figure out, oh, okay, so each bill is 1 gram, so you can actually weigh the money and know how much you got. All right, so 150K is 7.5 keys of cash. I'd steal that 10 months out of the year. I was in Charleston, South Carolina, had a spare bedroom. I just open up the door, chuck the backpack in the bedroom, and be gone with it.
And just go on to your next.
It was a weird lifestyle.
Let me ask you this. So to me, it doesn't seem like you, or to at least to my knowledge, you don't talk about it too much. You didn't live a crazy flashy life. It was more of the action, and just the doing it is kind of what drew you to it. Am I wrong?
You're not incorrect. I did not. It was not. It was not until I met my stripper girlfriend. That I started to spend massive amounts of money. All right.
Why is that though? Because I mean, just off of the 10 months, if that's $1.6 million,
Sure.
At that point, a lot of criminals, they would just kind of, go off the rails. Like I heard you talking about a story, talking about the gentleman that was buying all the properties.
Right.
And you just kind of didn't take that route. Why not?
So the problem is that if you're making money illegally, stealing money illegally,
there's no proof.
Well, you can't really brag about that stuff.
Well, right.
And I've never been the guy, other than I like my watches. Like I've got an MRG on today, legally purchased, but I've never been the guy that wants to flaunt stuff.
Well, maybe not even flaunt to public, but like just I can imagine, thinking of maybe how you might be thinking with that type of money. You might want to buy yourself something nice. Like what?
Well, I mean, I had a Mercedes, a used Mercedes. I had a brand new Mini Cooper. I lived on the water, so I had that.
Right.
I had a boat and a jet ski. So I mean, I had some nice stuff.
Yeah.
Don't make a mistake on that.
No, yeah.
I did, and I dressed well, but I didn't.
It was less of like the social aspect. It was more kind of just.
So here's the thing: when you're online, all right, you commit crime because of status, cash, ideology. All right, ideology. Am I pissed off at somebody politically, socially, whatever?
Right.
Cash, just trying to steal cash, but the status is kind of important online because it boosts your ego up. All right.
Right.
Now, you can gain status by a few different ways. You can gain status because, hey, I've got a skill level and I'm able to do shit that you can't.
Right.
All right. And that's where I was. Now, I say that because today on TikTok, Facebook, Telegram, all these other platforms that facilitate crime, you see a lot of individuals that will rap about how much money they're stealing.
Yeah.
Or they will show the fans of cash and talk about the crime and everything else. Why do they do that?
To show that they're able to do it.
To gain status.
Right.
They don't have a skill set.
Yeah.
But by God, they can steal money. And by showing how much they're able to steal, they elevate their status in those environments.
Well, let me ask you this though. Isn't maybe not used for the best, but isn't stealing money in a way kind of a skill?
It is. Yeah, it absolutely is.
Yeah. Because that's not something that
I mean, I've known people that were horribly skilled and couldn't steal shit.
Yeah.
All right. So you're absolutely right. That is a skill.
Right.
But how do you illustrate that skill? You illustrate it by showing this is what I'm able to acquire.
Right.
All right. I was never in that type of game like that. I was always the guy. I'm a puzzle guy to begin with. I love figuring out how to do this stuff and everything else.
Yeah.
So there was that aspect of it. I'm not horribly motivated by money. I like money.
Yeah.
But my motivation was what I could do with the money because I'm the guy who always bought love.
Well, you're also you're the OG. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? You're the Godfather of the
Yeah, I
internet.
didn't have to impress
Yeah, you
anybody.
didn't have to. You already had that status,
Right.
while everybody else is kind of like under you, trying to show themselves when you're already kind of at the pinnacle
Yeah,
of
you don't,
that.
and that's one of the things. And you know, I was in that regard, I was around people that had money and had money.
Right.
So I didn't grow up in, you know, in Eastern Kentucky. My parents and everything, they were poor and everything. But when I got involved in crime, I was around people that had money. So they didn't really.
Right.
Once you've had money, you don't have that necessity of trying to impress people.
Right.
All right. Yeah, you've got nice stuff, but you don't flaunt it. You don't.
Yeah, you're
I've
not
never
like
thought myself better than anybody.
Yeah.
Or anything else like that. Even today, I'm very adamant about being equal across the board with people. You know, I don't. I had this C-level position of chief criminal officer. I don't really view that as a plus.
Yeah.
I'm just an employee,
Right.
no different than anybody else in the company. And I think that's the way that if we treated more people like that, you know, as equal across the board, we'd probably be a hell of a lot better off.
A lot better
Okay.
off. You mentioned that you're a puzzle solver.
Yeah.
Obviously. But so being a puzzle solver, what do you do today to solve puzzles? Because that's something that I like to think of myself as a puzzle solver as well. But have you ever lost that? Have you ever kind of like had to leave it and then come back to it? Like how do you still get that? What gives you that feeling now?
Well, a lot of it is, so I'm very fortunate. I work with FBI on a lot of stuff, and I'm very good about predicting trends of
Okay.
where something will go and explaining why it's going there.
Right.
All right. So I was warning about Telegram a while back, but like to give you an idea, I'm the first guy that starts to complain about synthetic fraud.
Okay.
I started talking about synthetic fraud 6-7 years ago.
Way
All right.
before it.
Way before anybody knew what that shit was. Same thing with this thing called refunding fraud, which is it redefines cybercrime as we know it today. First guy to complain about that. I'm also able to predict where this stuff goes. So I'm very good about being able to break it down, see how these environments are working and operating, and figuring out how to circumvent those types of crimes.
Right.
So it's basically applying the exact same mindset for
Just
the
on the
good
other
guys
side.
these days. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that puzzle ability or that need I have to solve things. That's never went anywhere at all.
Oh yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to poke at, because I think as an individual, you develop that as a kid to want to like solve things, and everybody does it differently. You
They
know,
do.
whether it's through actually like doing puzzles or complex problems or trying to figure out ways to do things
Right.
in every aspect. I did want to go back though. So where did we leave off on the Shadow Crew story?
Where do we leave off on Shadow Crew?
Because you were about
I tell you where we left. So we got busted.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
We got busted. How much time? So okay, we're a little tight.
Yeah,
So-
we got probably 20 minutes
Okay.
or so.
So Shadow Crew, my forum techie, Albert Gonzalez, we had this thing called the CVV1 breach,
Mhm.
all right, or hack. And what happens is we were the first group that really did not spearfishing, but phishing campaigns,
Yeah.
all right, sending out emails saying we're your bank and we need you to update security.
And this is a big group of you all at
Oh,
this,
huge
at this
group,
point.
4,000
Huge.
people strong, all right? And we were getting millions of different profiles in, sending out millions of emails a day, everything else. And so back then we were getting card numbers, pins, and you were using those card numbers for this thing called CNP, card not present fraud.
Okay.
So basically you'd get online, you'd find a laptop, you'd order the laptop using stolen credit card details, get it in, put it on eBay for sale, and cash it out, all right? Now, that was what was called carding, and carding, a good carder could profit $30,000 to $40,000 a month
Right.
doing that, okay? What happens, though, we were getting the card numbers and the pins. Now, on the back of your credit or debit card, that magnetic stripe, there are 3 data tracks there. The first data track is the customer's name. Second data track is the card number / 16-digit algorithm out beside of that. That's what you have to have in order to take it to an ATM. You have to know that algorithm. You can't guess it. You can't generate it. By God, you got to know it.
Thing.
Now, what we found out, though, is that none of the banks, and I mean none of the banks, had implemented that hash for track 2. Now, what that actually means is you've got the card number,
Right.
/ and you put any 16 digits out beside of it, it would encode.
Oh, wow.
We had the PIN. So that 16, that $30,000 to $40,000 a month for a CNP card not present fraudster quickly turned into $30,000 to $40,000 a day.
Right. Especially with 4,000 of y'all working on it at once.
Taking
I can imagine
these cards to ATMs and pulling out cash.
Right.
That got a lot of law enforcement attention pretty quickly.
Oh, I'm sure.
All right. Because we were eating every single bank on the planet alive.
Yeah.
All right. Now, my forum techie, Albert Gonzalez, his dumbass, broad daylight, New Jersey. He's standing at an ATM for 40 minutes with counterfeit debit cards, white plastic cards, just with tracks encoded on the back. 40 minutes, he's standing in broad daylight, putting in one card, pulling out $20 bills, stuffing them in a backpack. 40 minutes. Meanwhile, across the street, it just so happens, 2 New Jersey cops sitting there having coffee, eating lunch, whatever the hell they're doing.
And they're watching him.
They start watching this kid like, what the hell? They watch the kid for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Until finally one looks at the other and says, let me go see what this kid's doing.
Right.
He walks up to Albert. Albert's got a wig on.
Oh, gosh.
He's got this disguise. Albert falls apart.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We didn't know Albert had got arrested. So Albert flips, goes to work for the Secret Service. Now, what's happening with me at that same time, I'm doing tax return identity theft. I'm stealing $160,000 a week. I'm head of Shadow Crew, and I know law enforcement is coming.
Yeah.
Because we've intercepted text messages, everything else. I get worried about RICO. I'm thinking that since I'm the head of this organization, I'm going to be charged for
RICO
every
charges.
single crime, and that's exactly what they do. Every single crime that all my members have committed.
Yeah.
So I retire. I retire at almost the exact same time that Albert's arrested.
Okay.
That's how I evade law enforcement. Okay.
Right. When everybody else is getting caught. Yeah,
so Albert gets arrested. He flips. He goes to work for the Secret Service. Now, it's important to understand that back then, the Secret Service, they didn't know what the hell they were doing. They had no clue. So they literally asked Albert, hey, how would you catch these guys?
Right.
Albert's like, have you tried a VPN?
Yeah.
And they were literally, what's that? Yeah.
Wow.
So he tells them, they're like, shit, that's a good idea.
So in theory, your group of the Shadow Crew were way more advanced.
We were, but we were dumbasses too.
Right.
Make no mistake.
Well, there's holes in every organization.
Right. Okay. We were idiots as well.
Yeah.
So Albert comes back into Shadow Crew. I had retired. Albert takes over Shadow Crew. Anybody who questions that, because I was the guy, I put everyone in charge in Shadow Crew. Right. Anyone that questioned his authority, he just boots out. Bans them.
Yeah.
At the same time, he says, hey, to be safer, I've set up a VPN.
Oh, no.
So that's where the case comes from.
Yeah.
The VPN captures addresses,
Everybody.
real names, transactions, everything else, to the tune of like $7 million, something like that, over a 4-month investigation. So Forbes gives us, we make the front cover of Forbes August, get busted October 26th. I get arrested February 8th of 2005.
2005. Okay.
Yeah, like 4 months after that is when I get arrested.
So what were you thinking those 4 months? I mean, I'm sure you were in shambles.
So I was the guy who, I was married for 9 years, and I lied to my wife every single day of those 9 years. Took her 3 years to find out I was a criminal. Next 6 years were me saying, I've stopped, I will stop, I'm going to stop. Just a little while longer. Finally, it turned into, you like spending the money, don't you?
Yeah.
So she leaves me. And
she just wasn't able to take the...
She couldn't handle it. And who could blame her? I mean, I was an asshole, complete criminal.
Do
Crime was my primary function.
Do you think that, aside from your childhood, just being in that field, like the cybercrime and everything, that made it hard for you to have relationships with everybody?
So with me, I am, you wouldn't know it most of the time, but I'm an introvert. Mm-hmm. I fight being an introvert by being this outrageous extrovert.
Right.
But I've also got, and you see this with a lot of cyber criminals, I've got almost a degree of Asperger's syndrome. Okay. I get locked on a subject and I'm there. So it was nothing for me to spend 16, 18 hours a day in front of a computer.
Right.
All right. I get locked on a topic. Even today, I'm married. My wife will tell you that, hey, if I get locked into something, they literally sometimes have to make me stop. Just
Go eat dinner.
I get pissed off.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. But back then it was the same way. My wife leaves. I get that fear I have of being abandoned became real. I get suicidal. I go into horrible depression, get suicidal, call this psychologist, crying, tell her everything.
On top of being on Forbes.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, yeah.
So I get go through all this stuff and start seeing a psychologist. She's trying to get me to commit to go into real estate and stop breaking the law. And I'm like, is there a difference? And what happened? I saw her for about 4 months, and I was 34. And I got lonely one night, and I got horny one night, and had never been to a strip club. And I was like, now's the night.
Right.
So I'm the idiot, literally that guy that falls in love with the first stripper that he sees. First one, I walk in, she walks by, and I'm like, ha! That's the one for me.
Oh, my gosh.
So move her in with me, dude. After I move her in with me, find out she's addicted to cocaine. Not only addicted to cocaine, but prostituting herself to support her habit. And it took me, I didn't admit it to myself or anybody else until I got on Lex Friedman. That's the first time I admitted it. But I absolutely loved the shit out of that girl. I mean, I was crazy about her.
Do you think love has, I don't know, I'm really young, so I'm trying to figure it out, you know what I mean? But do you think love has any boundaries? Like, do you think that people, two ways to ask this. Do you think people will love somebody sometimes under any circumstance, and then people sometimes, I'm trying to think of the best way to say it. Do you think somebody can love somebody under any circumstance, in the sense, like, no matter what they do? You know what I mean?
I think that I think it's a noble thing to have an idea of unconditional love.
Yeah.
But in reality, I don't think that there is such a thing, or should be, as unconditional love. Will you love somebody? And that's what my mom did all the time. Can I do this to you and you'll still love me?
Right.
Now, Elizabeth, the stripper girl, love the hell out of her, but I chose crime over her.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that she had said to me after I got arrested and everything was, you could have got a fucking job. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Nothing I can say to that. You're completely right. I chose crime above you.
Yeah.
All right. That's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
It really is. That you're choosing that type of activity over someone that you love and that loves you.
Well, at that point, though, it had kind of, maybe not your entire life, but it kind of consumed you.
Yeah.
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 And it was just at the forefront of what you're thinking.
I mean, back then, I learned all these lessons over the years. Back then, I thought I could fix people. You can't fix them.
Oh, no. You can only help somebody if they want to be helped.
And I didn't understand that then. So I thought I could fix her. Thought if I just stuck it out that, we'd be together. So I ended up getting engaged to her. I got arrested 3 weeks before our wedding date.
Yeah.
And of course, it all falls apart from that point on. But I got arrested. Secret Service, they came in, and I spent like a week in a county jail. Elizabeth had no idea what I did for a living. Wow. I had this joke.
No idea.
Oh, it was funny as shit to me until I got arrested. I was like, I told everybody I'm a fraud consultant. I just didn't tell them which side of the fraud equation.
Yeah.
Once you get arrested, though, that shit becomes serious, because all those people you thought were friends, you lied to all those people.
Exactly.
They're not your friends anymore.
Social engineering.
Right. So, I spent a week in a county jail. 2 Secret Service agents, they fly down, pull me out of a cell. They're like, we got your laptop. I'm like, yeah. Got anything on it? Yeah. Well, you're going to be charged for everything that's on it. I figured, can you do anything for us? And my exact words were, you let me get back with Elizabeth and I'll do whatever you want me to do. And they were like, we're going to get you out. So they let me sit there for 3 months. Yeah. And after 3 months, they lowered the bond from $327K to $1,000. Pay that and get out. Elizabeth had talked to me a couple of times while I was locked up. My first phone call was not to family, it was to her. I'm out. She's like, I'll be there. So she shows up. She had a friend that owned a limousine company. She shows up in a limousine.
You were being held in Texas, correct?
Charleston at this point, South Carolina. So I served my time in Texas after the prison escape. Yeah. But she shows up in a limousine, drops my clothes on the pavement. I'm sitting there crying like a baby. She leaves. Secret Service agent looks at me. He's like, is that your fiance? And I'm like, yeah. He was like, dude, I'm sorry. And I'm like, yeah. So I started committing crime that night.
Oh, wow.
That night. He actually, out of his pocket, he paid for me a hotel room. He leaves.
Agent?
As soon as he leaves, within 30 minutes, I'm back breaking the law.
So let me ask you this: was it cyber at that point, or was it kind of just whatever you could?
It was tax return, identity theft, credit card fraud, all that. So I, as soon as Secret Service popped me out, I started breaking the law. I moved from Charleston, South Carolina, to Columbia, South Carolina. Moved Elizabeth with me, and broke the law from inside Secret Service offices for the next 10 months.
Wow.
While they were in the room with me.
Under their noses.
Yeah, right there. And took them 10 months to find out, and they were pissed.
I can only imagine. I can literally only imagine what the agents were thinking. Like, we brought this guy on to work for us, and he snaked us.
They were not happy.
Yeah.
So they revoked my bond. I was only under state charges at that point in time.
Okay.
So what happens is the state judge reinstates the bond because they revoked it improperly.
And then it goes back up to 300.
Nobody calls Secret Service to tell them I walk out of prison or county jail.
Yeah.
And so I walked out. My mom was waiting in the parking lot, and I was like, I can't stay. So I take off on a cross-country crime spree. Steal $600,000 in the space of 4 months. The night before, one night I was in Las Vegas, Nevada. I had stolen $160K out of ATMs. Woke up the next morning, signed on to cartersmarket.com, and I am United States Most Wanted. So sat there looking at it, and actually said it out loud. I was like, well, Brett, you've made the United States Most Wanted list. What now?
Yeah.
And I said, I'm going to Disney World. So
wow.
Went to Disney World.
So that's really the first thing you did after realizing that you were on the most wanted list.
First thing, I sat there for about 20 minutes, look at it, and I was like, well, I've made the United States Most Wanted list. What now? And I was like, fuck it, I'm going to Disney World.
What was that like? What were, I mean, I can't even imagine the feeling like being on the most wanted list, deciding you're going to go to Disney World. What were you doing? Just like hanging out?
I was actually planning on stealing enough money to move down to Florianopolis, Brazil.
Okay.
It's right on the water. Nice city. And I was
so you're trying to lay low.
Yeah, I was going to set up shop down there again
Yeah.
and commit more crime.
Yeah.
And so I went to Disney World. They tracked me with this thing called Triggerfish. Today it's known as a Stingray cell phone location device. Tracked me with that. I was at Orlando for I think like 6 weeks, something like that. Going to Disney World every day.
Oh yeah.
Enjoying Mickey and Universal and everything else. And so they got me, arrested me, sent me to prison, escaped from prison.
Yeah, what was that like? Please elaborate on that.
So I say escape. It was an escape, but I was at a minimum security.
Okay.
All right. So I had a job outside of the fence. My dad assisted me in the escape. And just left. I was gone for about 3 weeks. U.S. Marshals, they were canvassing a 3-state area, and they find me in Lexington, Kentucky.
Oh wow!
So over on Richmond Road.
So you were being held at what jail at this point in Charleston?
I went on the run out of Charleston. I was arrested in Orlando, moved back to Columbia, South Carolina. They transported me back to Columbia, South Carolina. Spent like 7 months in the county jail there in Columbia. Was then sent to prison, escaped from prison, arrested in Lexington.
What? Where was the prison that you escaped from?
Ashland, Kentucky.
Wow.
So arrested in Lexington, spent 8 months in solitary confinement from that.
I wanted to ask you, I literally have that in my notes. What was that like mentally? Like, I'm sure it was a roller coaster up and down all the way around. You know what I mean?
Well,
I'm sure.
Come to find out, it takes a human being about a week to acclimate to much any type of environment.
Okay.
The first week is the hardest.
Right.
All right. But you understand that you don't have any human interaction at all. Just you. You don't have books.
Wow.
Lights are on all the time. So you cover your face up with a pillow to have some darkness in there.
Right.
Or a sheet rather. You sleep 16, 18 hours a day, as much as you possibly can.
Make time go by.
Yeah. You get to the point, because you don't have any type of interaction or mental engagement, you get to the point that you start to see things. So you'll see a bug run across the floor and it's not there.
Wow.
You do. You see, or you hear voices.
You start talking to yourself.
You do. You start talking. You start answering yourself.
Yeah. That's which is wild.
You start doing
It's amazing how the mind works
Yeah.
in solitary.
Yeah, it absolutely it has an effect. It absolutely does.
What was really going through your mind though, aside from like the hallucinations and stuff? Like, what were some of the topics that you were thinking about? Like, how am I going to get out of here? What were you thinking about? Love? Were you thinking about like what? While you spent 8 months there, what were you thinking?
Well,
about?
it's not just the solitary confinement, but the being in prison forces you. Well, if you're open to it, it forces you to consider your life. All right.
From an outside perspective looking in.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time going through everything.
Right.
A lot of time thinking about Elizabeth, thinking about all that interaction, thinking about my family. It took me about 2.5 years behind the fence to accept responsibility. I talked about responsibility when we started talking today. The idea, I'm a firm believer that you have to accept responsibility for yourself. You can't blame your parents. You can't blame your environment, your neighborhood, anything else. By God, you've got to step up and say, I am in charge of me.
Right.
Unless you can do that, how can you ever hope to overcome anything? Right. So you've got to take responsibility for yourself. It took me 2.5 years to sit there and say, well, I committed crime not because of my wife or family or sister or stripper girlfriend. I committed it because I chose to commit it.
And those were the things around me.
Right. So, and when you realize that, when you really understand that the only person that puts you in prison is you.
Is yourself.
That's a hard pill to swallow, but it's also a very freeing thing. Now, at the same time,
because you don't hold that grudge against anybody that you might, you might,
and that's what happens.
Yeah.
So usually in federal prison, it's about 2.5 to 3 years. You get the inmate that either accepts responsibility or just gets really angry.
Right. And the people that get really angry end up spending their life in prison.
Right. Okay. So I was very fortunate that I did accept responsibility, but I was also very fortunate that I lied to get in the drug program. Okay. So it was this thing called RDAP, Residential Drug Abuse Program, and it's got nothing to do with drugs. It's got to do with this thing called cognitive behavioral therapy. And it teaches you that your thoughts determine your feelings determine your actions. If you change the thought process way back here, it will result in actions being different. So I was also very fortunate in giving the tools to understand how to overcome and accept that responsibility as well.
Learning how to just deal with it. I mean, I can imagine with all the time, all the free time, they have to give you kind of like, I don't want to say coping mechanisms, but ways that you can, I mean, I guess you could kind of say coping mechanisms.
But understand that most of the time it's not like that for the inmate. All right. So RDAP is a special program. You have to be ordered into it. Okay. I lied. I told them I was addicted to cocaine.
Right. So normally they don't get this.
Right. But it was the best lie I ever told. Yeah. And I really believe that everyone needs a program like that. Yeah. All right. But most people don't get that. Most people, for prison in the United States, whatever tool set you go in with is usually the tool set you're released with. This idea that, we're going to train you to be a carpenter, or we're going to train you to be an electrician. Or, most of the time that doesn't work out.
Well, it's not voluntary. I'm a big believer in, it's a lot harder to learn something if you're being forced to learn it.
Yeah.
Or not even learn. It's a lot harder to adopt a pattern of life or a way of life if you're forced to do that.
Yeah, there's very little rehab in prison.
Yeah.
All right. Most of it's just for punishment.
I'm actually curious what you think about that. Do you think that our prison systems will ever like really bunker down on like trying to rehabilitate criminals instead of kind of making them outcasts in society?
It's a nice thought to think that we're going to get to the point in the United States that we would rehab people, but I don't really see that happening.
Why is that?
Well, because you've got there's a few excuses for that. The first is you've got a society where people who don't break the law, why should they pay for people who do break the law? Now that being said, what I mean by that is I would love to see education free in the United States.
Oh yeah.
All right. I would much rather that our tax dollars pay for that. And I've been in prison. I would much rather our tax dollars pay for that than pay for people who are incarcerated to get rehabbed.
Right.
All right. But now I also understand that when that individual is released from prison, the chances of them recidivating pretty damn high until they reach 40 years old.
Right, exactly. So it's kind of like that weird gray area where it's how much, if they do get back out, will they impact the society?
Well, you're going to pay for them one way or the other.
Right.
Is the thing.
Right.
Incarceration is about $36,000 a year per inmate.
Really?
Yeah. So you're paying for them one way or the other. If they get out and they don't have the tools, and they're right when they tell you, when you leave prison, they give you this bullshit line of, find you something you care about, find you a job, and you won't recidivate. You're right. You're right. All right. The problem is finding something you care about. What are you going to care about, first of all? Well, you're going back into the same environment, people, places, and things that got you in trouble to begin with.
Right, exactly.
So that's part of the issue, all right? The job, you ain't going to get a job, all right? Now, you can get all that
make
training.
It hard.
Right. You can get all that training in the world if you're able to even get it, but the chances of getting a job when you're competing with people who've never broken the law.
Right, exactly. It becomes kind of unfair.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's not going to happen. So you're automatically at a detriment, and the prison system kind of lies to inmates by giving you that hope that you're going to have that ability. You're usually not.
What being somebody that's been through that, what would you give to any advice, to anybody that ever has to struggle with that, like getting out of prison? Because I can only imagine the struggle. It is. You're being thrown back into society, and a lot of the time, if you've spent actual a lot of time, imagine what it was like for people. How long did you serve?
7.5.
7.5. When was your beginning and end?
Went in 2005, got out in 11, went back in I think 13 for a year.
Okay. So
7.5 total.
Even just in that time, that 7.5 years, I'm sure things changed out here a lot.
Yeah. We didn't have smartphones when I went in.
No, exactly. So what was that like?
We didn't have social media when I went in.
Do you think it would have been a lot worse, your impact, if there was social media and phones?
Yeah. It would have been nightmarish. Because it's so easy to manipulate people on Twitter, on Facebook, things like that.
Through a computer.
LinkedIn. Yeah. Stuff like that. It's much easier to manipulate.
Well, that's why I think that's why it's so popular today.
Yeah.
I think there's just back to we'll kind of full circle it back to like the abundance of accessibility. Like you said, what is it? 90% are known exploits. Yeah. Which is ridiculous. Being somebody that's not in this field, it's kind of hard to believe that people kind of just let it happen.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say let it happen.
Well, they don't let it happen, but they're not taking the correct precautions to.
But it's also understand that a lot of it is economically motivated. All right. So basic economics, your budget can go toward guns or butter. Yeah. All right. So it can go toward a customer experience, or it can go towards security.
Right.
So a lot of companies are more worried about growing the customer base. So a lot of the budget goes toward that instead of making their system more secure, which is problematic. Okay, so that's a lot of the issue right there. But we have to get to the point where we understand that, hey, these vulnerabilities, it's not that you're dealing with computer geniuses that are attacking you.
Right.
You're dealing with people who understand that, hey, all the stuff that we need is stuff that is known about.
Right, it's there, available.
Right.
Well, we're about 1 hour and 42 minutes. Before we wrap it up, I really wish that we had more time to go into your story, because there's still so much that there's so much. But I wanted to get into some things about what you do now. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about your car. Your car is awesome.
Thank you.
You seem to.
I like it.
Yeah. So the drive, we talked a little bit about before the podcast, but how was your drive?
Drive was good. You had reached out to me on Twitter. You were like, "Would you like to be on my show?" And I was like, "Well, shit, yeah." And I kept asking, do you do it by Zoom? And then finally,
no, I didn't understand. Like, I think I was trying, or I don't remember exactly what I was thinking, but I was thinking, how do you do it? I don't know. It just miscommunication. It
was. Then you said, well, we sit down and do it. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, I didn't want to like sound like the duh moment, but like, I just didn't understand your question.
Well, when you told me it was in person, I'm like, well, I can always come and do an L8 run.
Yeah. Oh, actually, this is from my brother, because I know he'll be watching this. So he thought of a question for me to ask you. What do you think about, well, you left here, you were here, but how do you think about like the orange 08? Have you tried the orange one?
I've got the
cherry.
red, the cherry out in the back.
Do you like them, or are they kind of?
Yeah, it's not the same. It's not. I've not tried the orange yet. I looked at it yesterday. I've got a trunk full of stuff right now.
Oh, you already got a bunch?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
So I've got like 6-8 cases in the trunk. And that's going in the back seat because I don't have room in the trunk. But
you'll be stocked up. Ready to go.
Yeah, and I'm going to stop and get more.
Oh yeah,
make no mistake. But no, I like the drink. I mean, it's worth it. And my dad. So the only place you can get pickled bologna, evidently, is Kentucky.
Really?
And he's a big pickled bologna guy. So I'm like, I'll bring you back some pickled bologna.
Yeah.
So I got to stop and get him that. But yeah, the car, I mean, you're asking about the car. The car is an Acura TLX Type S.
Yeah, it's awesome. It looks
it's
very
a great
nice.
car. It is. It's one of the best cars I've ever owned. And my wife has staked claim to it. She actually told me, she's like, you can drive it to Kentucky if you want.
But when you get back,
thank you for letting me drive my car.
Yeah.
So, but it handles well. It's I was considering that, and I was looking at a Lexus LS 500, big sedan.
Yes, like that's a nice car too.
It's a nice car.
That's very nice.
It's a nice car, but I settled on that, and I think that's a much better choice.
Oh, yeah.
It handles. Yeah. It's beautiful, man. It's a great car.
I especially like your car. You know what I mean? Because
you've got a nice one too.
Well, they're very we were talking about it before he walked in. They're very complimenting. Red interior, the black wing, the black accents on the white body. I think it looks great.
It looks nice.
Well, that's what I was drawn to. I was drawn to more of the being in Lexington. I'm a Toyota guy, so I had to pick.
Nothing wrong with that. Have you seen the Crown yet or not? Are any of those on the streets yet?
I've not seen one. I've heard about them.
It looks like a nice vehicle.
I'm excited to see. I think I might have seen one GR. Have you seen the GR?
I have.
The Camry GR?
Like
those
that.
are nice.
Like
but yeah, before we wrap it up, like I said, I really wish there was a lot more that we could go into. Maybe we'll be coming down south before too long.
Sweet.
We'll either
we'll hook up and do something.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll get you in my small little studio area.
Yeah, we'll do something.
All right.
I want to ask you one more thing. What are you doing today? Like, are you
today?
Like, you're working to help prevent cybercrime.
So, dude, a lot of people don't have the opportunity that I've been given.
Yeah.
All right. My turnaround was my sister. It was my wife, Michelle. And then finally, it was the FBI that took me in under their wing.
Yeah.
And that gave me the ability. Today, I work with the largest companies on the planet. I travel all over the planet speaking and consulting. I got named for this past year. I was the first chief criminal officer on the planet for Arcos Labs. They do bot mitigation, ambassador for AARP. The book, my agent, is the same guy who's responsible for The Irishman, October Sky, and The World's Greatest Beer Run, which came out a couple months ago.
That'll be fun.
So that book is going to be out next year. I've got my own show at the Brett Johnson Show. I've just been on hiatus from recording episodes. So got that. I bitch a lot on Twitter, bitch a lot on LinkedIn.
Like them, though.
Yeah. I lead a very blessed life that, I say it all the time. I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful to have it.
Yeah.
And I really mean that. I really do. It's just, given the opportunity that I've been given, I don't take it lightly.
Yeah.
I don't. I even had an FBI agent tell me a few months back, he's like, it's not just the work that you're doing right now, but you're laying the groundwork for people that are coming after you. You take these because cybercrime is big right now. And I take that seriously of conducting myself in a way that lays the groundwork for people that are criminals that are coming to try to repeat what I've done.
Right.
So it's important to do everything that you need to do to.
It's kind of amazing. You've been on two very crucial sides of the.
Yeah. Yeah, my sister said, I never do anything small. I've reached the apex of both levels.
Sides, which is very,
it's interesting.
Like, talking to you and hearing your story, I'm surprised your story isn't more broadcasted, because it's like you were on top of things that are current now.
Right.
Like, you are literally the godfather of the internet.
Right.
Like, I find it, like I said, kind of amazing that you hit the pinnacle on both sides. Like, you definitely will go down in history as, somebody that.
It's an interesting.
It's very interesting.
The book will. So I've been on. I've been on Lex Friedman,
which I love his stuff.
Been on Megyn Kelly. Some of these other big podcasts, and certainly I've been in a few books and everything else. I've got my own book coming out.
What's it going to be called?
We don't know yet. We don't say it on the title. It'll be out. I don't know why.
Next year, you said 2024.
Next year. Yeah.
Okay,
Probably
I'll,
late next
I'll
year.
definitely read that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll make sure you get
buy
a copy of that.
Cool.
But I just it's a good story. It's a hard story to live through.
I'm sure.
A lot of learning lessons along the way, but I'm grateful for what's happened. I've had people ask, and I think Friedman asked that too. Would I change anything?
Yeah.
And I piss people off when I say I wouldn't.
No,
I wouldn't.
I don't know how much we can really compare anything in our lives, but I've not done anything the magnitude you have.
But you got to
this.
understand that I'm fully convinced. I mean, it's weird that I know that I am in the place that I'm supposed to be doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And the only way that I'm here is because of everything that has been done to me or that I've done to other people. And some of it has been nightmarish shit.
Right.
But as bad as that is, I still wouldn't repeat it. I wouldn't do anything over.
Yeah.
You know?
So kind of similar question. This is what I was going with. We don't really have a comparable life, but I like to say I don't regret anything. Do you regret any of it though?
Oh, lots of regrets.
Yeah. Lots of regrets, but you wouldn't change it.
Oh man, lots of regrets, but would not change it. Lots of regrets.
I like that, and I think we'll end it there.
Sounds.
Thank you, Brett Johnson. I really do appreciate you coming out.
Thank you for bringing me on. I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.